Actually have to Google what is Quo Vadis. My Latin is very bad. Apparently I have to answer where do we go from here. As Ms. Wong has pointed out, I don't think people are very interested about parliamentary reforms lately. In fact, I think if you go and talk to everyone, people feel a sense of helplessness. There's nothing much that can be done. When I was in Petronas, the joke was, if you are sad and down, you just need to check your bank balance because the bonus is very good. Nowadays, the trick, if you are sad or down with what's happening, all you need to do is just check your Facebook to see the kind of jokes people play on Najib. Because, you know, the kind of comments that people make about Najib, it's just exemplify the stage that our society is now, an utter sense of helplessness and loss of confidence in the whole system, government, and so on. But the good thing, I think, in spite of the whole parliamentary reform was overtaken by the huge scandal, at least I think people can reflect that whatever happened now is a confirmation that when parliamentary system does not work, this is what will happen to a country and society. I think the public now can appreciate a lot better that this is where Malaysia will be going unless we strengthen our important institutions and most of all the parliamentary system that we have. The problem with Najib and the scandal and the investigation into 1MDB would have been avoided. We would not have reached this stage if we have a functioning Public Accounts Committee. If we do not have the kind of standing orders that put a gag on whatever finding of the Public Accounts Committee, we would not have given Najib enough time for him to short-circuit. I may be sued for this yet again, is it? Najib wouldn't have had enough time to pull off the rug of the investigation that had happened. Of course, if we had had a functioning select committee on transparency, on finance, on government's commitments, 1MDB may have been stopped much earlier before it reached the stage that it is now. And I think if we have a parliament where the MPs are protected from the executives, where MPs understand that as the third pillar of government, that they do not have to fear the executive, and that the MPs and the legislation can impeach the executive as what happened in the US or anywhere else, you wouldn't have ended up with the kind of MPs that we have now, who are so afraid. With one word from Najib and the henchmen, you would see the BN MPs running here and there, basically showing their loyalty to Najib. We also suffer because our parliamentary system, because of the lack of the reforms, does not have a tradition of cross-bench agreements when it comes to national matter. You do not have bipartisanship in Malaysian parliament. It's just impossible to happen. Because whereas in other countries, mature democracy, party lines, whip will exercise its discretion to enforce party lines on policy issues. When it comes to Malaysia, party lines means you are dead if you ever show a different opinion. Difference of opinion is just not tolerated in our parliament, or in fact in our political system. It is okay in a time when, I suppose, we do not have a prime minister like Najib. Yeah? But when you need both opposition and government benches to come together, at least to agree on matters to bring the country forward when we are stuck, like our current situation, the lack of cross-bench agreements in the past make it almost impossible for us to go past the impasse that we have now. And of course, that brings us to the current problem of the inability to push through a vote of no confidence. In other countries, when you have all these things, even if it's not functioning 100%, at least if you have bits and pieces of the things that I mentioned, you have an independent public accounts committee, you have select committees that can make sure it's an early warning system that can block something like 1MDB, you have a protection from the might of the executive, you have a tradition of cross-bench agreements on matters of national policy. Obviously, if all that exists in our system, we would have had a vote of no confidence by now for a prime minister like Najib. Because I think you can make a straw poll and you can catch even every single BN MPs. I think a lot of them cannot hide their own feeling of their concern that in order to move forward, we need a new prime minister. The question is whether they have the guts and courage to do it. And I don't think any one of them actually have it. So now that the issue has become so gigantic nationally that I think, as I say, you go everywhere, people speak about helplessness, about not knowing where the country will go. Actually, it's a perfect opportunity that for the first time, we can push the agenda for parliamentary reforms beyond the corridors of parliament. I think before this, the public didn't even understand how parliament works. They expect a lot from the MPs, but the public themselves did not understand that the whole parliamentary system, the House standing orders and everything, were designed such as to limit the leeway and independence of the MP. And this is the best time for us to repackage and represent all these issues to the public so that they can understand and appreciate that all this has to come together, that a parliamentary reform agenda is not an agenda on its own, it's part and parcel of the bigger reform that we need to push for the country. There is more awareness now, for example, that the system in parliament doesn't work. I think the public by now begins to appreciate, as YB Loke mentioned just now, it's very difficult for MPs to even speak in parliament. Ms. Wong mentioned about every time there's a vote and every time there's a question of absent MPs, there'll be a huge outcry from the public. And I always read people say, oh, you are paid to be in parliament. What the public doesn't understand is that most MPs actually have to clock in at 10 and sits there listening to Bu Mokhtar until 12 midnight. That's the biggest torture, you know. And it's really not productive because parliament is a talk shop. Nothing gets discussed properly, nothing gets acted properly. So the public expectation that you just sit there to just listen to these runs, I personally think is just not productive. I rather go out and do something, help people, spread the words, do ceramah, because I think that has more impact in changing the country than sitting there listening to Bu Mokhtar. But that's exactly what happens, because you can only speak based on your turns, and your turn depends on your seniority. So I suppose Loke, myself, and Chin Tong, we have a bit leeway lah, because we can speak usually rather early in the beginning of the session. But if you are quite a junior MP in the rank, in the grand scheme of things, you have to wait 3 or 4 weeks until the end of the parliamentary session, and you get your 3 minutes to speak at 2 o'clock in the morning. You can ask whether any of the reporters were around to listen to them. I doubt, you can ask the reporters. I doubt the reporters listen. That's why one of the things that I picked up, I'm a first-term MP, one of the first things that I picked up is that in order to make use of the parliamentary session, I only have to do 3 things, 3 most important things. Number 1, I have to speak early and deliver a good parliamentary speech which is captured by video, because it's not so much what you say in the day one that makes a difference, it's your video going viral that makes a difference. So I usually make sure that I tell my people that, okay, I'm going to speak in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, please stand by, catch everything, and then I spend the next 2 days just viraling the whole thing. Okay. Secondly, I noticed, and I learned very earlier on, is that if you want to get the message across from Parliament outside, it's not what you say in Parliament, it is the press conference that you hold outside. Because I sympathize with the reporters. I don't think if I were the reporters, I want to hear listening to Azalina screaming 24/7, you know? So it's only natural that reporters basically sit around the media area and just listen and cover the press conference one after another. So it is the news that is delivered through the press conference outside the house that gets to the media. The public doesn't know this, you know. And the third thing, which I realized very earlier on, that if you want to make a difference, apart from those two, you just have to be present during the most important votings, although it's not going to defeat the bill, but the public expects you to be there. So if you are taking your shower and suddenly you get a message, there will be a voting in 1 hour, you better rush back to Parliament, you know. The public doesn't understand this. But I think now with more focus on how the Parliament has to stand up to executive, I think it is an opportunity for us to educate the public, and through that, I hope they can appreciate how important the Parliament to function in order to avoid a repeat of what we have now with Najib. And the good thing is, the public, I think, is with us now. It's just a matter of, there are some MPs, you know, YB Tong, YB Loke, from PKR, YB Surendran. These are the people who consistently speak about parliamentary reforms, you know. I think they have to consistently push for it as well. Refsa, it's not a question of whether it is going to be submerged by Najib issues or not. It has to be brought together with Najib issues. So the last part of what I want to touch, because I think it's better to take questions later on and save whatever during the question times. I have to answer this. In my opinion, where are we heading with parliamentary reform? Loke mentioned it, but I think he put a dot there, perhaps to allow me to elaborate a bit more. I was quite hopeful in the last session. I don't know about the speaker and the other MPs, but the speaker is really nice and gentle and kind with me. I think to the annoyance of so many people in Parliament, you know, so I was very hopeful then that when he pulled a stunt in the last session on the basis of parliamentary reform, we all backed him. We wanted him to push all the way. Unfortunately, I'm quite doubtful now. I wonder whether the whole parliamentary reform thing in the last session was just a bargaining chip to get rid of Shahidan, because they can't get along. You know, the speaker and the minister couldn't get along. So I wonder now that a new minister has been appointed to be in charge of Parliament. I was informed that Azalina is now taking charge of Parliament. God forbid, but apparently that's the case. Politically, I read it as Najib giving in to the demand of the speaker. The speaker couldn't get along with the last minister, and obviously he wanted the speaker, a new minister, or not a minister at all. I suppose a compromise, a new minister was installed, so it's one for speaker, nil for Shahidan. So it's a sort of moral victory for him. So I would like to see whether he will continue with his push for parliamentary reform as he had said in the last session. And in fact, I hope if he's listening or reading today's, I think everyone in the House will be counting on him, and his credibility will be sorely at stake if now with a new minister in charge of Parliament, suddenly the talk of parliamentary reforms just fizzle out. So although I'm a bit pessimistic about it, I'm still hoping that the good dear speaker will continue to do exactly what he promised in the House last session. And then what are the other indicators of where this parliamentary reform is going? Looking at how 4, I think, of the previous PAC membership all just walked out of PAC just to take rather junior ministerial positions. It's not even a full ministership. All the 4.
Except what?
Except who?
Sabah.
Who?
Tuaran.
Oh yeah, but Tuaran, okay, Tuaran became a minister, but it's not so much because he is a member of PAC, because he is a president of APCO. So it's whether or not he's a member of PAC, he would have been appointed as minister anyway, because he's president of a component party. But the other 3 members, which is Kuala Selangor, Kepala Batas, the head itself, Pulai, and also Melaka, Masjid Tanah, these are all just given rather junior Timbalan Menteri, deputy ministership. The fact that none of them put their feet down and say, my job in PAC is more important than that meager deputy minister's position, I think it's such a letdown that my conviction that parliamentary reform agenda will be pushed, I think, just went from here down straight away. So I'm again, with the change of minister, with what happened to PAC, I'm not optimistic. And then to top it off, you have Zahid as the new deputy prime minister. I think by convention, the deputy prime minister will become the chief whip of BN. I think Zahid will have more claws, in that sense, and a bit more brutal than the previous ones. And given that this talk about vote of no confidence will continue to crop up, there will always be suspicions. In fact, I would enjoy the next parliamentary session to see how BN will kill each other, because they will be wondering who is going to cross over. In that situation, I would imagine Zahid as the new chief whip of BM will be a total regimented, dictatorial chief whip who will actually monitor every single of BN's MPs. So the sense of some independence, if there was any before with the BN MPs, will be completely lost by now, because they will be under heavy guards and heavy surveillance all the time. And I don't think they dare to even voice out a simple, minor policy disagreements with the government, let alone on something like parliamentary reform. So to sum it up, I don't think that parliamentary reform will continue the pace that we saw in the last few months. If you leave it to Parliament and BN, by now I think it's gone. It's totally thing is gone. The only thing that we can rely on now is the external push. That if the public actually understands this has to come together, and it is very important to reconstitute our parliament in order to be a much better check and balance with a prime minister like Najib, then I think BN, whatever they like to do, have to respond to it a bit. Otherwise, they look very bad. And I would like to end with this anecdote. We are at a very unique junction in our history. Many alignments, realignments, recomposition, rethinking, re-evaluation, whatever will happen at this point. People will relook everything in almost different opinions. And I think more and more people will be open to a different perspective now, given how bad Najib is as a prime minister. So this is the time when I think we can push for the public to accept that what we need is just not parliamentary reform, but is a total reform of the whole system. The whole system just doesn't work anymore. Whether the political coalition system that BN had dominated, the race, politics, everything has to be reconstituted, reconfigured, and I think rebuilt from a fresh, new perspective altogether. And this is the time, if Malaysians appreciate, this may be our finest hours in the sense that we may remake Malaysia altogether, that a Malaysia that will be more relevant for the next 50 years, or if we fail to do that, we may very quickly condemn Malaysia to a very quick and steep decline very soon. And I think if people understand that, then the reform of, the parliamentary reform will be packaged together with the reform of the whole system, our society, and that is a better way to achieve parliamentary reform than to look just at parliamentary reform on its own that we have been doing for the last 20 to 30 years.